do something. So we know we want to add a student to a list, right? Let's make a place for that list. So I'm going to add another row underneath this div. So after all that, but before my script tags, I'm going to make another row div. And inside there, I'm going to do another medium offset to medium 8. So it'll be the same width as the other. Medium offset 2 dot medium 8. Since I've used that before, it auto-completed. Don't forget columns, the columns class. There we go. And I'm just going to put a UL in there. Let's give that UL an ID so we can identify it later of student dash list. Not too complicated. So when the form's submitted, I need to make an LI. I think we called this render LI yesterday, or render list item, or render item. I'm going to say build instead of render this time because it's actually not going to render it immediately. It's just going to make the thing. So underneath add student, I'll make another function, another method called build list item. Don't forget my comma at the end for when I add more methods after that. Now keep in mind, even though I'm going to call this from inside add student, even if add student weren't an event handler, the order doesn't matter here. Inside an object literal, you can put the methods in any order. It doesn't matter. It's going to create the whole object before it tries to figure out what calls what. So you can put them in any order. Now, in order to build that list item, it's going to have information about the student, right? So we could just say this.build list item and pass it the student name. Spoiler alert, this won't actually work, but let's ignore that for the moment. And just put the name here. But what if we do want a student to have more than just a name at some point? Let's go ahead and plan for that now. So let's make build list item take some sort of student object. It's going to be an object that looks, something like that. An object with a name. So instead of having a variable called student name, let's make one called student. Const student, and that's going to be an object. The object's going to have a name, and that name is going to be event target.studentName.value. I'm going to go ahead and put my comma there. This is an object literal, and I anticipate putting more things in there later. Now I have a feeling that we haven't used this form object for the last time. So instead of saying event.target.studentName.value, I'm going to go ahead and save that to its own variable. I'm just going to call it F for short instead of form. I'm pretty sure I'll know what that means. So that's the event target. Now I can say f.studentName.value. Now I can pass in the actual student to build list item. And what should it do? First, let's just make sure we get that far. I will just console log the student object and make sure that we get the right thing. Refresh. Charlie. This .build list item is not a function. I have been betrayed. Line 17. This .build list item. I'm inside this object. Add students and methods, so is build list item. It seems like this is not what I thought it was here. What is it? Yeah, it's the same thing as the event target, right? It's the form. Doesn't matter that this happens to be a method because it was called by an event. So that automatically binds it to the target of the event, even if it's inside an object. So we have no other good way to refer to the object without actually using the name of the variable that we happen to assign it to, which is not how we want to do it. That makes it very brittle. We want a way to refer to the current object. So let's find a way around this. What can we do? Well, when we set up this event listener, instead of just this .add student, we could manually set the value of this using bind. I think we looked at that very briefly yesterday. So bind lets you set the value of this to anything you want. Remember, I'm not calling this function. This is the function as an object. And functions as objects have their own methods that we can do things with. So we want to bind it to, well, we want to bind it to whatever this is on line 7, i.e. the current object. So if we bind it to this here, and now our event listener is not just this add student, it's this add student bound to this, then this will be what we expect. And now we're very glad that we used event target instead of this up here. Let's try that again. I knew that. Alex B for Baker. Hey, object with a name of Alex Baker is what got logged to the console. Victory is ours. So it is kind of boring having just a name. Let's give each student a unique identifier, a number that will increment automatically. So the first one will be student 1, the second one will be student 2, etc. So an ID. So we need a variable to keep track of that. So each new student should have an ID that is one more than whatever the highest ID happens to be. So we need a place to keep track of what ID that is. So we could set another property on the object to keep track of the max ID up here. Just start it out at 0. You can do that. Remember, these are just object properties, so you can set data properties as well as functions the same way inside the literal. We could also just do it inside our init function by saying this dot max equals 0. Same thing. So then we could say the ID of the student that we're adding is this dot max plus 1. You dig? Let's try this again. Alex H. ID 1, name Alex H. Let's put Alex B up there again. Notice how annoying that is that I have to keep backspacing over it. Why doesn't it just clear that out? Alex B. Also ID 1. We didn't actually change the value of this dot max, did we? We added 1, but we didn't increment the original, so let's do that. We'll do it after we build the list item. We'll say this dot max plus plus. We do have an increment operator in JavaScript. same thing as this dot max plus equal 1, which is the same thing as this max equal this max plus 1. Try it again. SAM1, ID1, SAM2, ID2, SAM9000, ID3. It works. Because the first time it runs add student, not only does it increment it from 0 here, it permanently updates it to 1. So the next time through, it gets upped to 2. Very nice. Worth a commit. Create a student object with a name and an ID. Aim and ID. There we go. Beautiful. Going to push it. Now we're still not actually building a list item or adding it to the unordered list. But again, as we make progress here and we know we're passing the right object around, I'm going to go ahead and make commits. For one thing, it'll make it easier later if you do need to retrace my steps and don't want to sit through a 1,000,000-hour video. You can just look at my history on GitHub, and it'll be a piece of cake. Did we talk about how to clone a repo, an existing repo? Okay, let's look at that real quick before we move on.